Hello, this is John, DIY on the FF Cars forum, and I'm here this evening. This is something I don't normally do, but there's been a lot of people on the forum and so forth, and friends and everybody that I've talked about this car and a number of the systems in the car, and a lot of people out there have been helping with some of the input for some of the issues that we all have building the Factory 5 supercar. I'm showing you kind of what it looks like after about a year and a half, and you know, basically this is called a go-kart. It's got all the basic systems in there, all the things I'm trying to verify before I put the body on the car. One of the good things, since I'm looking at it right now, this is actually a low scaffolding thing that I modified. Started out as a drywall scaffold, and I cut up a weight bench, and all these white extensions are what I put on it to, and then it's got a bunch of different pulleys and things like that. And what I do basically is I'm able to hoist the body off the car, and I do that by using that winch, which is down there. It's all tied into a bar that's actually down there, down inside, and what that does is it pulls these various ropes through these pulleys, and I've got 4 connect points that I built blocks for there, and then there's a couple that actually hang on the front of the car up there that lift this thing up when I'm by myself. I started this car in another house, and basically I moved and built a garage that I'm really happy with, and fortunate to be able to have all the different things that I've done with the new garage, especially with a project like this. So it's something not everybody can do, but it really made working this car a nice thing to do on my off time. So anyway, this is where I spend a lot of time. Again, there's a car after about a year and a half. And a lot of people ask, hey, you know, what's it like? You know, should I get a kit car and build a kit car? And that all depends. There's a lot of kit cars out there that are a lot more simple than this. This is probably one of the most complex kit cars available out there. You know, so there's a lot of experience and with electronics, engines, and just putting things together. And you know, you got to be hard-headed too. So. Otherwise, you'll be lucky if you get very far with this thing. That's not to say you can. It just means that it's a lot of hard work, a lot of research, and if you put your mind to it, you can definitely get it done. You just gotta stick with it, just like any other project, but especially with the GTM. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the kind of what this is about, what the car is, what some of the systems in the car are. Some things that, you know, if you're a guy that's new at this and you haven't had a lot of experience with you know, a big project like this, I'll give you some hints on some things you want to watch out for. And then I've got my companion here. This is Moose. He basically hangs out with me all the time, and he keeps me company, so that helps a lot too. It's a pretty lonely place in here. Anyway, I got this garage set up. I've got air lines plumbed in. These are all galvanized pipe. That makes things helpful. I had a lift put in, which is okay. You know, I really have the lift for other cars, not necessarily the GTM, because as you build the GTM, you'll have jack stands and things like that. These dollies that I have it sitting on are probably the most helpful thing to have for any project like this. The car's about 2,700 pounds when it's done, and right now it's still pretty light, so it's really easy to move this thing around. I can actually move it around to the front of the lift. I can get it up there if I need to, and then I can slide it back around here in the project corner and work on it here over by the work table, which I have set up here. This is the workbench that I do a lot of stuff there, and then I've got the kind of table set up for you know, reading or whatever. It's not really much of a work table, but it's more just to put stuff on and do a little research if I want to keep things clean. This is This is kind of the down and dirty, work. I got a vacuum set up. I've got a little metal brake. This thing's handy for bending panels and so forth. And then I've got a little bookshelf over there, and I've got a compressor room in here where I actually, I've got 2 compressors in here. They're tapped in side by side, and then I've got a line that actually runs up into the ceiling and then comes out right there, and then it just kind of feeds all these air drops that I have at various locations for draining the system, and it's really an optimum air system for doing anything. So you can do sand, paint, all that kind of stuff. So when you buy the GTM kit, basically what you get is you get a full chassis. It's got aluminum panels. It's got an interior. It's got gauges. The gauges are from Speed Hut. These gauges are actually different. What I did is I took the gauges that were in the kit and I sent them back and exchanged them for some more specialized gauges. Basically what I have here now is I've got a GPS speedometer. So that thing is basically takes satellite site or satellite information. It figures out your speed. And then I've got a tachometer where I can have some indicators for when I'm reaching red line and so forth. And then I've got a quad gauge, which is really handy. That way you don't have a bunch of gauges all over the place. I've got 4 gauges in one there. And that's basically water, oil pressure, voltage, and fuel capacity. And then I've got an oil temperature gauge, which will go in the car later. Probably not here. I may mount it in the engine compartment. It's more for doing diagnostics and just doing a quick check to make sure everything's okay. I may mount it somewhere in the back, maybe with a mirror or something like that, so I can see it from where I'm sitting. Basically, going over the car has an ISIS electrical system. It's a multiplexing system that basically is run off of a computer. It's a master cell. There's actually a cell that looks like that under this. This is basically a thermostatically controlled fan. Keeps the master cell cool, and that master cell takes on-off inputs from relays and switches, and it tells the power cell what circuit to energize, and then the power cell takes battery voltage through the red cables and then sends them out through all the various colored cables to the different components in the front of the car. And then on the rear, the master cell back there does the same exact thing. It communicates in series with the front power cell that's run off the master cell, and it takes the same type of signals, and it controls a lot of the stuff in the back of the car, and that prevents all the heavy-duty wiring and all that stuff that typically would go in on a fuse box, and it just helps manage things. You can troubleshoot things easier and so forth. I've got another mini fuse box that's made from Bussmann, and there you can see the gas. Those are Welded clutch pedal, brake pedal. Actually, yeah, it's a clutch pedal and a brake pedal, and then it's a regular GM gas pedal mounted over there. That gas pedal comes with a computer for the LS engines, and that's an aftermarket computer for a standalone LS engine install. Right now I've got all the diagnostic stuff set up, so I've got the gauges set up on my phone. That's OBD2. I've got a Bluetooth OBD2 indicator down in there. That's basically wireless Bluetooth, and it's taking all the computer readings from the engine computer, and it displays them on here. Here I've got basically different screens that I can go through to see different ways I want to read different things. That's for the math. I mean, that's everything with the computer. You got all kinds of different stuff in there. Anything on OBD2 will read out on that display. In addition to that, I've got a laptop set up, and on the laptop I've got the ISIS system interface. The ISIS runs off of Wi-Fi, so it's wireless, and it comes into the computer, and that basically runs everything. Your engine, starter, ignition on, your lighting, your windows, your door poppers, your heating and air conditioning controls all run off of the ISIS interface. that's basically like a website. And then right here you see the control. So if you're driving in the car, you'll see these various displays. When you get in, for instance, you would have your engine, ignition and start. That's your ignition and start. Right now the ignition is on, and if I want to hit the starter, I would simply hit the starter by clicking on the starter button. And that same display actually comes up on the iPhone. I don't have it brought up on this one, but later on when I have a flat screen in the car, I'll be running all that stuff off of the single flat screen. So anyway, I've got that, and then for the ISIS system, there's an interface for the various switch inputs and things like that. Here you'll see a series of boxes in a matrix that when you do the installation, you basically test lighting signals. You can see the two blocks that lit up there for the headlights. There's on and then off. And what that does is it tells you that that particular circuit is functioning the way you want it. So as you're doing the installation with the electrical, you can check all the circuits on your laptop. In addition to that, on this car, I've got traction control. It's a race logic system that basically takes inputs from each wheel. There's actually a sensor on each wheel on this car that goes in to the traction control computer, and the traction control computer is hooked up to the wiring harness for the injectors on the engine. And when you have wheel spin on any tire, you can program this system to take a certain percentage of the firing order out, or you can play with all kinds of parameters to basically stop wheel spin via the engine output. So anyway, that's some of the cool stuff. There's a whole bunch of big diagnostics and everything that are built into this car, so that I can see those things anywhere. If I'm sitting in a parking lot, I can actually program. I've got a computer for programming the engine as well, which will actually write to the engine parameters, and I can tune the engine sitting in the car. All that stuff's going to be interfaced through a flat top or a flat screen monitor later on. I haven't bought that yet because I'm kind of waiting to see what the latest and greatest is when that stuff is available on the market. By the time I'm done with the car, which will probably be about a couple of years, maybe two years at the most. The engine in the car is an LS7. It was built by RPM Motor Works in California, and this particular LS7's got a 660 horsepower package, which is basically ported heads, a cam, intake, hardened valves, and so forth. It's got quite an extraordinary idle to it. You'll hear that in a minute. And the 660 horsepower is not rear wheel horsepower. I think it's basically crankshaft horsepower. But anyway, as you go through the engine compartment, here's the fuel system. Basically, that's all plumbed. That's all bent by hand using a hand bender. And there's various filters and check valves and a regulator up there on the top. And you can kind of see it's pretty tight. I mean, everything in the engine compartment is very tight. A lot of the hardware here is actually aircraft hardware, so nuts, bolts, solid rivets that I used a rivet gun, a bucking bar, and so forth to shoot that stuff. And then you'll see there's a number of these are hold down brackets for the tank. Those are adjustable, so I can tighten things down and keep the tanks from moving around. There's a couple of nut plates on that thing. That makes it so you don't have to get to the back side with another wrench. You can just come to the front side and undo stuff, and that thing basically just stays there in place. The wheels on the car are made by BC Forged. That's an aftermarket company. They make custom wheels. These are two-piece forged wheels, and then the brake systems are Z06 brakes and rotors. They're comparable to Brembo's, but these are production, and I kind of decided to go with the production. Cost was better, and also the being a production design, it's gone through all the testing and everything, so I'm pretty confident in these brakes. And in addition to that, you know, the car is really light, and these are probably more than I need for this car. But anyway, that's what they look like. The suspension components, the car is based on a C5 Corvette, so a lot of the suspension components are the A-arms off of a C5. These were, I actually bought a 1998 C5 Corvette, stripped it down, took the parts that I needed, and then took all the hardware and wiring harnesses and all that extra stuff, and kept that around so that when I needed it, I could use it. A lot of guys will buy a pallet of parts or specify the specific parts they need, and then they miss out on all that other good stuff and end up paying the same price. With all the extra stuff I had, I was actually able to sell it, and came out so that all this stuff basically didn't cost me anything. All the springs are coil over. That's all included in the kit. Coming back here on the engine, basically that's an oil catch can. This is a dry sump system. I've got a tank over there. It's a Peterson's oil tank for a dry sump engine. I'll show you that in a minute. The Mendiola transaxle, this is a custom-made transaxle from Mendiola, which is based out of San Diego, California. It's a pretty pricey transaxle, but it will handle the horsepower of the engine. And it's actually a little more stout, and it bolts right up to the LS7 with no adapter plate. You don't have to invert the oil system or anything like that. The problem with this thing is it takes about a year if you order one for this car. At least it did for me, because they were having a production issue with metal heat treating gears and so forth. So they had to slow down, stop production, and then finally they got back online. And I told them, you know, when I first bought the car that I'd wait, and it took a year, and they came through and gave me this beautiful piece of machinery, and I'm excited to see how it all works once this thing's going. But anyway, there's the cables. Those are shift cables coming into the Mendiola transaxle. That's all the shift linkage there. This is a lot better than a mechanical setup. It takes all the play out of the system. These cables go all the way up to the shifter, which is up forward there. And that way, again, you know, with all the linkage that comes with the kit, there's a lot of joints and universals and things like that that traverse from up there all the way back here, and you know, getting a lot of play and slop that's not ideal. I mean, it's okay, but it's the cables are better, a little more positive feel to the shift overall. Coming around this side, you can see the Race Logic traction control cable. These are aircraft quality cables, Tefzol coated, and they're just a little more robust than some of the typical automotive stuff that's out there. And I put these out here because of the you know, they're exposed and could end up chafing and things like that. Here's the oil tank. The oil tank's plumbed. It's got -12 lines that go to the catch can, and they also go down and feed the engine down underneath. There's basically an in and an out port on the forward part of the LS7. In this particular case, I had to block off the oil cooler in and out, and then I plumbed the actual oil lines direct to the tank here. But that's all based on research and information. I kind of figured out how to do it, and it's not that hard. It's again, it's a matter of going and researching the stuff. Here's the engine computer, and then actually that's a fuse box, and then under that's the engine computer, and then down here in the stack up down underneath there is the Race Logic traction control computer. So as you can see, there's not a lot of room in there, but I prefer to have it all here, and this whole car is really made to work on. And this is the typical thing I get as I'm trying to do stuff on the car. That's moves. Come on, down. So anyway, coming back around, these are TIG welded fuel tanks, both sides. It's got dual tanks, one here, one over there. There's the engine. It's pretty tight, as you can see. All this stuff is covered up, but it's still real close to you. when you're sitting on the car. You're basically leaning against that tank.